Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to address something, kind of a bit of misinformation. Not so much misinformation is not entirely true from a nutrition perspective. And that was this idea that someone presented in a video I made talking about the problems with carnivore diets. They came in saying low carb diets and keto diets and carnivore diets are the solution to fix insulin sensitivity. You know, a massive percentage of our population in America is pre-diabetic or type 2 diabetic, and this is the key to reversing it. And they were very insistent upon it, but the problem with that is that that's just not fully supported by the data or even the clinical research. It's just not. Now, am I saying that some people don't have success doing that? Of course they do. But we know a lot at this point about the mechanisms of reversing in most of the symptoms of type 2 diabetes. Okay. And the thing that we run into with that is that what most of the researchers and experts and medical doctors tend to agree on is that the loss of body fat is the number one key. Okay. And I want to be clear there. And I'm not saying that automatically anyone with extra body fat is going to be type 2 diabetic. What I'm saying is that the vast overwhelming majority of people with type 2 diabetes are, and what we see in all the research is that insulin sensitivity improves with fat loss for people who are at a certain level of morbidity. Okay? Does that mean everyone who loses body fat always improves insulin sensitivity? No, not in all circumstances, but in the case of people with insulin resistance who are carrying extra body fat, yes, it is heavily correlated. And it's extremely heavily correlated, probably more than anything else as far as increasing it. So what the data shows there is that any diet that causes fat loss, will help in this case. Some will be better than others. Now, the other thing that people point out is, well, if we reduce carbohydrates, then obviously insulin sensitivity improves. No, not necessarily. That's not always the case. Okay, that's not always the case. Because in many cases, people who eat large amounts of carbohydrates have great insulin sensitivity because, again, they have a lot of muscle tissue. They're physically active. So let's come over and look at that. I mean, if you want to look at non-diet interventions, gaining muscle mass improves insulin sensitivity dramatically, irrespective of carbohydrate intake. Just exercising more, moving more, being more physically active improves it. All of those things, they help. But muscle mass is big on the list. Okay? People who have a lot of muscle oftentimes have lower circulating insulin on high carb diets than a lot of people do on keto diets. So context there. So no, that's not always the case. But let's come over and talk about the problems with the keto diet. It's that in regards to that, you see people who it doesn't help their insulin sensitivity. It doesn't improve their type 2 diabetes enough to come off medications. And I know people personally, people on my Facebook friends list who suffer with this problem. They insist that that's what they're going to keep doing, that's what works, but I'm like, you're still on your medications. How many years have you been doing this? Okay, and I've seen multiple examples of this. You go to the various keto groups, keto forums. There are people who have been doing keto diets for who are type 2 diabetic for 2 or 3 years, who still, and I mean oftentimes they're pretty strict adherents to it, they still are not able to come off their diabetes medications yet. It's not regulating it enough to do so, even prolonged periods of time, because they still haven't achieved a calorie deficit. They still haven't lost the body fat to the point where they need to be to get the situation under control. Because at the end of the day, what you have to remember, ketogenic diets are still ultra high in calories, and they're highest in the calories that we store easiest as body fat, and that's dietary fat. Okay, and that is a point that has to be considered. And dietary fat does not require insulin to be stored as body fat. It has other mechanisms. So, part of your problem. The other thing too, saturated fat itself is well documented in the literature to reduce insulin sensitivity in large amounts of it. Again, it's a dose-dependent response. It's like in a moderate amount, it's fine. Like everything else, though, there's a dose-dependent response. All right, so one aspect of this diet might be helping with it and another then hurts it. And again, that's why the success rate isn't as high as people would like for it to be. It's like, oh, just do keto and it will all be resolved. Well, no, that's just not true. The success rate in practice by practicing clinicians who I've known of, seen their works, talked to a few here and there, just as many of them, if not more of them, have had higher success rates on just balanced diets instead of low carb diets. In other words, you take the person who's diabetic, have them start tracking intake so that they're in an energy deficit. You work on the other things that improve insulin sensitivity, reducing refined sugars, reducing saturated fat, increasing fiber intake, increasing vegetable intake. Okay, that has a very high success rate if they will eat the calorie deficit and lose the weight. Okay, that has a very high success rate. So when people try to say something like, well, the keto diet is the key to doing that, the majority of clinicians are not. That's not what they're finding the most success with. I'm not saying some people don't find success. I want to be clear there. I'm not saying quite a few people haven't had success doing that. Well, yeah, it's a restrictive diet. A lot of people do lose weight. They do eat less calories on it. Okay, there's certain aspects to ketosis that can help with a lot of people's appetite. And they lose body fat, therefore, yeah, of course, that can help. And for some people, that may be enough to completely reverse all the symptoms. But it's certainly not everyone, and it's certainly not the majority. The other method of just following a balanced diet, particularly under the care of a registered dietitian, while working with your doctor on it, that actually has a pretty dang good success rate if people will adhere and follow through. Okay, the answer is not just to do a keto diet, and that's one of the things I tell people. You shouldn't just be jumping up doing a keto diet just because. There are side effects. It can be harmful. Most registered dietitians I know of out there say, you probably shouldn't do that outside of the care of a medical professional because of some of the risks that can be involved, with fluid balance, electrolyte, things like that. There are risks to it. Okay, so it's not the solution. It's not the thing that you say, hey, this is what I need to do and it's automatically going to work. No, there are other things that are actually more successful. It shouldn't be, oh, this is the immediate solution, because it has its own set of problems also, and it has its own health consequences and health risks. It's not the healthiest thing you could be doing. It really isn't. I'm not saying everything we do should always be the healthiest, but put that in perspective. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I'll talk to you guys next time.